In the year 100 BCE, a child was born into one of Rome's ancient aristocratic families. Gaius Julius Caesar, destined for greatness, was heir to privilege, but the world he entered was fraught with danger. Rome was a city of power struggles, ambition, and intrigue. From a young age, Caesar showed a curiosity and daring that set him apart from his peers. He survived political purges under Sulla, narrowly escaping death because of his family ties. Yet these early brushes with mortality forged in him a fearless drive. Caesar's education was rigorous, blending oratory, philosophy, and the art of war. He learned to read both the minds of men and the pulse of the people. By his 20s, Caesar had married Cornelia, whose father was a political ally. Their union produced a daughter, Julia, and tied Caesar to another powerful Roman family. Even in matters of the heart, Caesar's ambition guided him, as every connection became a step toward power. By 31, he had already distinguished himself on the battlefield, earning loyalty through courage and charisma. Yet it was politics that fascinated him most. He observed the Senate and its inflexible traditions, recognizing that the old ways of aristocratic rule could be bent, but never broken without audacity. From Spain to Rome, every campaign, every speech, every alliance was a calculated move. The seeds of one man's revolution were already sown. By 59 BCE, Caesar had achieved the consulship, the highest elected office of the Republic. But this was not a victory won without conflict. The Senate's conservative faction, led by the likes of Cato the Younger, viewed him as a dangerous upstart. They intended to block every measure he proposed. To overcome opposition, Caesar formed an unprecedented alliance with two of Rome's most powerful men. Pompey, the legendary general of Roman conquests, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in the city. Their pact, the First Triumvirate, was built on shared ambition. Pompey sought recognition for his veterans, Crassus sought financial advantage, and Caesar sought authority and influence. To solidify the alliance, Caesar married his daughter Julia to Pompey, intertwining family and politics. With this bond in place, he proposed legislation to reward Pompey's veterans and grant Crassus lucrative tax breaks. Predictably, the Senate obstructed him, refusing to hold a vote. Undeterred, Caesar turned to the people. He brought the legislation to the public forum, surrounded by supporters, veterans, and the roar of an expectant crowd. Here, the Senate's authority was powerless. With Pompey and Crassus present, the crowd witnessed the unification of Rome's three most powerful men. The law passed, and a message was sent. Caesar would bend the Republic to achieve his goals. After his consulship, Caesar set his sights beyond Rome, on the lands known as Gaul, roughly modern-day France. Few in Rome believed such a conquest was possible. Yet Caesar's ambition knew no bounds. He took command of a modest Roman province and transformed it into the launching point for a campaign that would expand the Republic and his own fame. For nearly a decade, Caesar waged war across Gaul. His strategies were bold, his tactics innovative, his brutality effective. He crushed tribes, built roads, and secured loyalty through both rewards and fear. By the time word of his victories reached Rome, Caesar had not only conquered territory, but hearts and minds, especially those of his soldiers, whose allegiance was to him personally. Back in Rome, the Senate, led by Cato the Younger, grew increasingly alarmed. Reports detailed staggering deaths, brutal suppression, and Caesar's growing influence. But as long as he remained in Gaul, he was untouchable. His governorship shielded him from prosecution, and the only recourse for his enemies was to recall him, a politically explosive move. To secure his position, Caesar convened Pompey and Crassus at Lucca in 56 BCE. Their relationship had grown tense, but Caesar brokered a solution. Pompey and Crassus would run as consuls, while he extended his command in Gaul. Power was divided, but Caesar's influence remained absolute. With this arrangement, he could continue the campaign that would cement his legacy as one of history's most formidable generals. By 55 BCE, the delicate balance of power that had allowed Caesar to dominate Roman politics began to crumble. Julia, his daughter and Pompey's wife, died in childbirth. She had been the living bond between Caesar and Pompey, a human bridge holding the first triumvirate together. Without her, the alliance was fractured. Tensions rose further when Crassus, Caesar's wealthy ally, launched a military campaign against Parthia and was killed in battle, his head reportedly displayed as a warning. The triumvirate that had once controlled Rome now lay in ruins. Pompey, distraught over Julia's death, drifted away from Caesar. The two men, once allies, were now separated not by ideology, but by tragedy. Caesar attempted to rebuild their bond, offering his great niece as a potential wife to Pompey, but the gesture was refused. Political power was no longer united. Rome was on the brink, and the streets became increasingly violent. Into this chaos stepped a man named Clodius, a tribune with a reputation for ruthlessness. He commanded paramilitary gangs, enforcing his will on the city and igniting widespread fear. When Clodius was found dead on a Roman road, his wife Fulvia displayed his battered corpse to the public, inciting riots that ultimately burned the Senate house to the ground. The very symbols of Roman governance lay in ash. The republic teetered on the edge of collapse, and the alliances that had once preserved Caesar's security were gone. With the Senate divided and Pompey drifting toward his former conservative allies, Caesar faced a choice: return to Rome as a private citizen, vulnerable to prosecution, or cross the line and risk civil war. On January 10th, 49 BCE, he made the decision that would change history. At the Rubicon, he looked across the shallow waters separating Cisalpine Gaul from Italy proper. To step forward was to declare rebellion. To stay was to risk his life. With a final command, Caesar led his troops across the river. Elia iacta est, the die was cast. Civil war had begun. Over the next 3 years, Romans fought Romans in bloody campaigns that reshaped the Italian peninsula. Pompey, once Caesar's partner, was defeated and fled to the east. Cities burned. Armies marched. The Republic, already weakened by political chaos, was now at war with itself. In 46 BCE, after years of war, Caesar returned to Rome triumphant. Yet the city he had conquered was broken, plagued by poverty, unrest, and hunger. To restore order, Caesar needed more than military victory. He needed political authority. The Senate, wary of his ambition, watched closely. To secure the support of the Republic's elite, Caesar reached out to Marcus Junius Brutus, a young politician of impeccable lineage and the son of one of his long-term lovers. Caesar promised Brutus a governorship in exchange for loyalty. Brutus, though wary of Caesar's growing power, accepted. By the fall of 46 BCE, Caesar was granted the role of dictator. But unlike previous dictators, whose office was limited to 6 months in times of crisis, Caesar sought and received a term of 10 years with annual Senate review. He initiated sweeping reforms, rebuilding the Senate House, improving infrastructure, expanding the Senate from 600 to 900 members to ensure loyalists outnumbered opponents, recalibrating the calendar, the Julian calendar still in use today, and centralizing political power. Despite these accomplishments, many senators grew uneasy. Caesar's consolidation of power, his suspension of certain voting rights, and his increasing ego signaled the man who no longer saw himself as part of the Republic. He saw himself above it. The seeds of resentment were sprouting, even among those closest to him. By early 44 BCE, Caesar's power in Rome was unprecedented. The reforms he enacted, the Senate he controlled, the army loyal only to him, everything signaled the rise of a ruler in all but name. During the festival of Lupercalia, a ceremonial crown symbolizing kingship was offered to him by Mark Antony before the crowd. Though Caesar declined the diadem, the incident revealed the anxiety simmering among Romans. Could a man who had amassed such power truly be content with the Republic? Omens were read. The priest Spirino warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. But Caesar, confident in his authority and army, dismissed the warnings. To the people, his refusal of the crown seemed humility. To senators like Cassius, it was proof that Caesar sought to become king, and a threat that could not be ignored. The time for discussion was over. The time for action had come. Fear and ambition converged in secret rooms across Rome. Cassius and Brutus, once allies and protégés of Caesar, now conspired against him. They met with like-minded senators, persuading even friends of Caesar that the only way to preserve the Republic was through his assassination. For Brutus, the decision was agonizing. He had been nurtured and protected by Caesar, yet he saw a man who no longer respected the Republic, who treated the Senate as subordinate, and whose ambition threatened the very fabric of Roman governance. The conspirators agreed. Caesar must die, publicly in the Senate, to send a clear message that no man could stand above the laws of Rome. March 15, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, had dreamt of his murder and begged him to stay home. Caesar wavered, reluctant to face what might be his end. But Decimus, one of his loyal generals, shamed him into attending, insisting that courage and honor demanded his presence. Inside the Senate, the conspirators surrounded Caesar with petitions and questions, concealing the daggers beneath their togas. And then, in a sudden, brutal moment, steel flashed. Caesar was stabbed repeatedly, falling at the foot of Pompey's statue. Among the attackers was Brutus, the man he had loved and nurtured. Caesar's last words, whispered to Brutus, would echo through history. Et tu, Brute? And you, my child? Rome erupted. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic, but instead they had plunged it into deeper disorder. Violence and uncertainty filled the streets. The death of one man could not restore what years of turmoil had already destroyed. The assassination of Caesar did not return power to the Senate. It created a vacuum filled only by civil war and new alliances. In the chaos, a second triumvirate formed, attempting to maintain control, but divisions and ambition led once again to bloodshed. From this turmoil emerged Augustus, Caesar's adopted heir. The Republic, a centuries-old experiment in shared governance, was gone. In its place rose the empire. Augustus assumed the name Caesar in honor of his adoptive father, establishing a line of emperors that would rule Rome for centuries. And so, the man whose ambition and genius transformed the Republic became its ultimate symbol. Julius Caesar's life, his rise and his death, marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, a lesson in power, loyalty, and the fragility of human institutions.